procrastination.
And what does this
stuck,
have to do with
and
business?
depression. One of the hardest states that we can shift. Today, we are going to set you up with concrete actions and education to shift into action, momentum, and success. Welcome to Embodied Entrepreneur. This podcast helps female entrepreneurs heal trauma and regulate the nervous system so that they can build a profitable, sustainable, and anxiety-free business. I'm your host, Sheridan Ruth. In this episode, I'm going to share the missing element of mindset coaching, productivity hacks, therapy, and even polyvagal theory so that you can create sustainable income from your business, build a somatic game plan, a roadmap, or a structure to support an increase in your income with ease, and spend more time taking naps, eating tacos, and laying in the sun. We're going to dive into what the freeze response is, how that differs from the fawn response, how does that impacts your results in your business, how to know if you're in a freeze or a fawn response, and how to heal this so that you can bring in more income and make more impact. I'll be sharing a nervous system regulation PDF, which will be a corresponding tool that you can use. You can download it on your phone and use it in your day-to-day life. And I'll mention that a couple of times throughout the episode. But let's get in. Let's dive in. Exciting. So, what is the freeze response? If you guys remember from some of the parts that we went through part 1, what is polyvagal theory? Part 2, what is the flight response? Part 3, what is the fight response? And today we're talking about freeze. Now, if any of you have seen the nervous system activation response, which is inside of my PDF that I'll be sharing with you that you can find in the show notes already, or you may already have it, you'll see that the nervous system goes from this social engagement. So we're curious and we're open and we're in the moment, we're feeling grounded, feeling really good. In polyvagal theory, we call it ventral vagal. Then we go into the sympathetic response, which is where there's a mobilization of energy and the body wants us to use that mobile energy either to get away from the threat or to move towards and fight the threat. This is like, I can do this. What happens when the body has so much mobilization energy that it becomes too much, it becomes overwhelmed, the nervous system becomes overwhelmed with this energy. So it's like you've been anxious for too long, or you've been angry for too long, or you've perceived that the threat is either so persistent that you can't fight it or run away from it, or so strong that you can't fight it or run away from it. The body goes into what we call the freeze response. In polyvagal theory, this is called the dorsal vagal response. It becomes overwhelmed and it collapses. It's an immobilization response. It's kind of like if you saw a bear in front of you and you said, well, the bear's going to outrun me, I'm not going to get away. There's no way I'm going to win a fight against the bear. What am I going to do? I'm going to play dead and just hope that the threat passes and the bear moves on. So what happens is our nervous system is perceiving that the most effective way to keep us safe is to go into feelings of helplessness, conserving our energy. It can feel numb. You can feel dissociated. Perhaps you feel very sad or you go into depression. There is a lot of heavy shame that is related to this space. It's this shutdown. It's this hopelessness. It's I feel trapped. And physically what's happening is your body is almost preparing for death, or at least thinking that if I pretend to be dead, then I'm going to be more safe. Now that sounds really dramatic. And it is really uncomfortable. It's really, really uncomfortable. What has been very helpful for me and my clients, and what I am hoping will be helpful for you, is to understand that even though, we're saying big words like death and big words like depression and helplessness and shame and shutdown, what's really happening, and this is what I believe my work adds on to polyvagal theory and makes it a little bit more empowering, is that what's really happening is your body has mobilized certain elements inside of the system in order to create an emotional, mental, and physiological response that it believes is going to support you. So in parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, we spoke about these elements, and we understand that the world is made up of air, ether, fire, water, and earth. And so when we go into the freeze response, basically what your body is doing, it's pulling on the heavier elements to create this heaviness in your body, this immobilization in your body, because it believes that that is going to keep you safe. So it mobilizes earth and water, which when we combine, we access the dosha, kapha in Ayurvedic theory and philosophy. Now, if this kind of is like, oh, I don't, what are you talking about, Sheridan? Don't worry about learning this. If that is interesting to you, awesome. Like, take it, go run with it, play with it, experiment with it. Let me know what you find. Let me know what you think. Send me a message. I like having these conversations. But if you're like, Sheridan, what are you talking about? Just forget that I said anything. I'll tell you when you need to really remember something important, and everything else I say, you can let it just marinate as it desires. So what's happened is we're immobilizing earth and water. Now you mobilize them to different degrees depending on what you're experiencing. It might be like a full on, there's a bear in front of me and I faint and I get down onto the ground. And it might just be like, I feel like I'm really heavy. I feel like I'm distracted. I feel like I'm procrastinating. I feel like I'm kind of in my head. I feel like I'm dissociating and I feel numb. Or you might activate the immobilization response to a lesser extent, and this is more known as the Fawn response. I believe that it is very important to differentiate between the freeze response and the Fawn response. A lot of the time, the Fawn response gets coupled under the freeze response, and I do that as well. I've done that. But it's important to understand the physiological differences so that we can understand what the body needs. The freeze response is a primal aspect of your nervous system being activated. It's kind of, you can almost say like an older response that the body has, play dead. The Fawn response is kind of in between the freeze response and the sympathetic nervous system that we covered in parts 2 and 3. Because yes, we are moving towards immobilization in that when we're fawning, so fawning is kind of like my favorite way to explain fawn. Oh. My favorite way to explain fawn is when you try to minimize your needs or avoid needs or kind of please the threat. So people pleasing, appease to the threat, kind of contort yourself in a way that you believe will be more safe. So this includes taking care of somebody else's needs, being helpful, being friendly, doing what you think that they want you to do, responding to criticism with praise. It can be a little bit kind of like burying your emotions or not being vulnerable. It can be a little bit like manipulative and controlling, not in a malicious way or a way that you're doing it on purpose, but it's kind of this, how can I what do I need to do in order to control a certain outcome that's going to be safer for me? That's what the fawn response is. And the freeze response is your body's inability to move or act against a threat. It's unable to move. Fawn, there is a movement, but we're doing it in a way that's like, how can I make myself physically smaller or less threatening to this threat, person, thought, perceived experience, right? It sits in between the sympathetic nervous system and the immobilization response, right? but we tend to put it underneath, but they're slightly different. It's important to understand that these responses must be moved through first before you solve any problems. These are physiological responses in the body, and unless you are feeling regulated and socially engaged and that you're safe, no matter what problem is behind this nervous system response, we're not going to be able to solve that problem until we get the body outside of the nervous system response.
Cool. And what does this have to do with business?
So this is Freya, who is my little co-host, and she gets to ask me questions and keep me on topic. She's building a business. She's trying to do it without anxiety. It's hard to be AI with anxiety. And she's trying to do it with ease, just like you are. So yeah, this is a good question. So this is really wonderful information. You may have heard it before when you've been doing your other nervous system education, but what on earth does this mean for my business, and how does this impact me inside of my business? That's the point of this 4-part series, right? It's pretty simple. I'm going to use myself as an example, and then I'm going to look at kind of some more general examples that I have received and witnessed and walked clients through, or just seen other people experience, or experienced myself. Now, freeze for me, this has appeared in my entrepreneurial journey in just not doing anything for years. I have been in some level of entrepreneurship since I left college. And I used to have dreams of teaching yoga. Yoga was something that really helped me a lot when I was dealing with insecurities around my appearance and my hair loss and my body. And so for many, many years, I really, really, really wanted to teach yoga, but I didn't even tell people about this. It was like a little whisper inside. And whenever I would even think about even going to a yoga studio, I just would shut down. I couldn't even think about it. I just complete shutdown. It didn't feel safe to think about, didn't feel safe to talk about. And it wasn't like there was a lot of anxiety around it. It was just, I couldn't even perceive that would be an option for me. It was only when I started doing more general nervous system work, without even realizing at that point, that I began to realize, and have thoughts and emotions of, I actually could go out and pursue yoga teaching. And they're actually, I could ask this person, I could tell this person. And all of a sudden I was giving one-on-one yoga classes in Medellin, Colombia. But because of my freeze response, I couldn't even have thoughts and emotions that showed me the opportunities and possibilities that were and had been always available to me. Now, when I did more nervous system work, I did come online and I started teaching yoga online, and that turned into coaching. And for a really long time, and I still catch myself in this sometimes, I entered into more of a fawn response. How did I do this? I would do this thing, and I'm a bit of a people pleaser. I've always been more of a people pleaser. That's been one of the strategies, Enneagram 2 over here. And I would fawn when sharing content. I would think, what's the best way that I can say what I think I want to say without ruffling too many feathers, without causing too much many people to look at me, without hurting people, without triggering people, without, I wanted to be, big enough to have an audience, to have a business, but not big enough that I would be controversial. I didn't want to hurt anyone. And so, because that would be really uncomfortable for me if I was to hurt, not only you don't want to hurt people, but it was more like I didn't trust myself to move through and fix if I actually did say something that was harmful to somebody or got a lot of attention or somebody misunderstood, right? And so I would fawn and I would write what I thought people wanted me to say. chances are a lot of you who are with me now weren't with me then, because I had to get out of that practice in order to actually start making an impact. And, it's 5 years later, and I don't think I'm still in that Fawn people pleasing response sometimes, but I've really learned to get out of it, and I actively learned to get out of it. And I've actually helped more people by being more regulated and not trying to control what you guys think of me, even though I still do it sometimes. We all do. But yeah, so that's kind of a part of my journey. Let's look at things that are more general. And I'm curious, like, as I read through this and as I share this, I would really love to know, where do you notice yourself freezing? Where do you notice yourself fawning? A question that you might consider with the freeze response is, what possibilities, opportunities am I not seeing because the other side of doing that thing doesn't feel safe? You might see something and you also may not, and that's okay. We might need to be more in the body before we can ask that question, and we're going to set you up so that you can do that. So how does being in a fawn response or a freeze response impact your business? Okay, so very put simply, results require action. If I want to have a successful business, if I want to impact people in the world, if I want to do things, I need to take action. In the fawn and in the freeze response specifically, action is perceived as dangerous. If I'm not taking action, then I'm not going to have a good business. I'm not going to serve people. I'm not going to support people. I'm not going to be successful in my business. Results require action. Action requires a regulated nervous system. Potent action requires a regulated nervous system. Results also require clarity and connection and boldness. Boldness, clarity, and connection are qualities that we embody when we are in the regulated nervous system, not in a freeze response and not in a fawn response. These are qualities that come to us when we are in that social engagement system or that ventral vagal system, or if we look at it with Ayurveda and the way that I describe them, the sattvic system. Once again, if those words mean nothing to you, let them mean nothing. So when we are in a fawn or a freeze response, we avoid work or action or certain levels and qualities of communication simply because we do not perceive it as safe. It's very difficult to do. Making certain decisions are difficult to do. Taking certain action is difficult to do. So we avoid it, we procrastinate it, we plan around it, or we don't even know that it's a possibility to do. We also struggle connecting with people from a relaxed, confident, and heart-centered way, meaning sales calls or sales just either do not happen, or if you do get the opportunity to have a sales conversation with somebody, it's really awkward and you feel icky and sticky. Remember that in this nervous system response, we're talking about the elements of earth and water. If you mix earth and water together, what do you have? Mud. What is mud? It's sticky. It's icky. It's like this heavy. So the feelings that we have in sales calls aren't relaxation and confidence and like, oh my God, I'm talking with my best friend. It's like, I feel like there's something wrong. I feel really heavy. I feel really exhausted. I feel kind of ashamed telling them this. I'm embarrassed. Ew, right? The other thing that happens is that we experience burnout because our body is on, even though we're sleeping, even though we feel disassociated, it's not this anxious energy of a stress response. It's our body feels like, our body believes that we are under stress. It's not going to be giving energy to nourishment and recuperation, right? The immune response or sexual arousal, or even being able to regulate your blood pressure or your heart rate or your temperature or make eye contact with people. It thinks that you are unsafe. And so it's flooding your system with endorphins and it's focusing on increasing your ability to, because we're playing dead, increasing your ability to store fuel, right? So it's like, how can I save my energy? And when it does this, what ends up happening is we get burnt out and we feel lethargic, heavy, and icky. Our body is in a stress response. We get burnt out. Because it's also here and because all the energy is going towards survival, we're lacking creativity. So it's really hard to think about content. It's really hard to think about your office. It's really hard to do things differently, to stand out, to be bold, like I said. And therefore, at the end of all of this, we end up lacking clients. There's something that's really important to say here. This one I want you to remember. When we are in the fawn or the freeze response, our body tends to usually be overloaded with shame. There is not a single human on this earth that wants more shame in their life. Shame is something that we avoid like moldy chicken. Disgusting, gross. Nobody wants that. When you're embodying shame, people perceive that. I personally have never, ever, ever wanted to work with a practitioner full of shame. Does it mean that I want to work with the perfect practitioners or coaches? No, I don't expect them to be perfect. But I do not want to be exposing my system to more shame. Now, I have awareness around this because I've done a lot of work around shame. Maybe you do too. Not everyone does. It's kind of this unconscious, primal, animalistic experience that our nervous system says, this person is kind of giving me the experience of shame. Do I want to be around that? Hell no. That's why shame kind of exists, to stop us from doing things that make us feel shame. That's a different conversation. So I'm going to share some kind of symptoms that you can look for to know whether or not you are acting in your business or in your life that would show us or tell us that you might be in either a fawn response or a freeze response, or maybe a little bit of the two. Ready? You can write these down. A fawn response. You're attracting codependent coaching relationships where your sense of self, your sense of validation as a practitioner depends on their praise or their engagement, and they depend on you for their sense of self or their confidence. Now, this doesn't mean that, when we engage in coaching relationships, of course, I want to know that my clients are happy. But there is a difference between using their experience to validate my worth as a person versus using their experience to troubleshoot and improve upon the systems of my coaching experience and relationship, right? And process. There's a difference. One is it's made about me as a person, and the other is as a professional, how can I do my best for my community? And there's a difference between a client using a coaching relationship to say, I'm needing some support around this decision. Can I get your insight? Versus, and using your nervous system to support their overall experience. We're here to use the support around us. And I'm a really big advocate for using the support that's available to you. And I remind all of my clients to do that all of the time. But what we are trying to support our clients in, and what we go to a coach for, is to strengthen our resourcefulness inside around decisions and around emotions. We kind of borrow their support. We don't need to rely on it for especially an extended period of time. When we do that, it becomes codependent. In a fawn, you might have pricing and contracts all over the place. So it's like you're sitting on a sales call. Maybe you feel they're a little bit uncomfortable about the length of the program or the price. And you're like, oh, wait, no, maybe I can actually adjust that. Or do you want like a payment plan or something like that? Now, this doesn't mean that you don't make adjustments when it's appropriate. That's totally okay as well. But there's a difference between doing it out of people pleasing or doing it out of fear that you won't make a sale versus saying, you and I are both humans. How can we meet together to reach a goal with each other, right? That's a little bit different. Obviously, people pleasing, fawning, making yourself feel small, dissociating when receiving feedbacks either from your clients or your coach. Sometimes you can get defensive. There's a couple of different things. I'm trying to make this a relatively short episode. And so I can't go into the nuances of every single one, but it's just an overview. And the big one that I see, and maybe it's because it's been my personal journey and that of many of my clients, saying what you think people want to hear instead of saying what is true for you in the moment and your beliefs, your values, your desires. This includes saying what you think people need to hear in order for you to make a sale. That's manipulation. That's not service. Okay, next one, freeze. The freeze response often manifests as a really big inner critic or perfectionism that moves towards shame and a feeling of I can't. So it's different to having an inner critic or a perfectionist that's like, I can do this, I've got to get this right, versus having that internal dialogue make you say, oh no, I can't do this. I can't do this. We also have fear around what people will think, leading to inaction, or because it's like, oh, well, I don't know what they think, so I'm not going to do anything, or fear around what people will think, leading to not feeling present in your body as you communicate. There are some physical symptoms, dizziness, nausea, IBS, things like that, which are laid out inside of the nervous system PDF. And just kind of for time, I would like to invite you to look at the nervous system PDF for the list of physical symptoms of these. One that I hear pretty often is that is characteristic of the freeze response is when you feel like every time you take another new step of showing yourself and expressing yourself and your voice and your work, your body perceives some type of danger and reacts and says, we have to pull back, we have to integrate, we have to think, we have to plan. It pullbacks. And now this can manifest as physical sickness. This can manifest as an intuitive knowing that's not actually intuition. It's a fear response. And this can manifest as something actually happening that makes you feel like you need to pull back, right? And so it's kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back type environment. It can also manifest as feeling stuck, feeling like it isn't working. Just this overgeneral or feeling of something is wrong. Something is wrong. This is one that I get personally, being somebody who has been diagnosed with complex PTSD. And when I work with people who have a more sensitive nervous system or have had chronic stress or trauma in their past, this feeling of it being wrong is massive. Taking a long time to do things that are fairly simple, such as send an email. This can be a sign of a freeze response. Watching a lot of Netflix, eating a lot of ice cream, doing a whole lot of nothing. Also a sign of a freeze response. And it's important to notice that I'm not saying that, you're going to be in bed for 4 days of the week. Although if that's happening, we definitely need to look into a freeze response. It could be something like, I'm pretty active in every other part of my life, but for some reason, I always, work kind of comes last. I'm always busy. I'm always pursuing something else. I'm doing certifications. I'm doing trainings, because when I sit down to work, my body goes into a freeze response. And naturally, my body's intelligence is to avoid that. Now, we have covered a lot. We have covered a lot today. Go ahead and listen to this a couple of times to let it all soak in. Of course, if you want to really let it all soak in, you're invited to Body-Based Business and to keep listening to the rest of the podcasts. This 4-part series was an introduction into the fundamental and underlying principles of the work that we're going to be doing here. And as we move forward into the next few episodes, in the next months, weeks, years, let's see how we go, we are going to unpack things in a much more specific way. So if you have something that you're working on or you have a question, please send me a message and I can make an episode around it. In the meantime, make sure that you have downloaded the Nervous System Regulation PDF, where you are going to learn how nervous system regulation and dysregulation looks in your mind, in your body, and in your habits, and exactly how to return to a grounded and calm space so that you can increase your income and your impact in your entrepreneurial journey. You will find the link for that in the show notes. Make sure you listen to the other episodes in this 4-part series. Can't wait to hear what you thought. Sending you so much love. Have a wonderful day.